like chapter 5 because it really shows you what you can do with a written text after you've analyzed it. Because analyzing something is not the end. I know that we focused on analysis all quarter long, and we will continue to, but it doesn't end there. You're not just looking at something in order to analyze it. Because as we've talked about, analysis is relatively objective. You're not really arguing in anything. You're simply investigating something. So I appreciate that this chapter goes beyond that. And then chapter 6 will go even further beyond it. So the two tasks of this chapter is to help you own a reading and then to help you use a reading once you own it. So when the text says that that you need to own a reading, that means you just have to be able to understand it enough to sit down and have a conversation about it. That means you need to know more than just what the article or whatever the written text is about, but that you have to understand the ideas well enough to be able to discuss it. Okay? And then once you own that reading, you should be able to use it. So those are two very different steps. First, understanding it well enough to where it almost becomes a part of you and that you can discuss it and look at things through that article's eyes. And then once you get that, ownership of the reading, you understand it that well, you can use it to your advantage. And we'll talk about how you can use it. So the 3 lives of a reading stated in the textbook is that a reading can be an object of analysis, a model for imitating, and a lens for viewing other material. So we're going to go through those a little bit more. So we've probably beaten analysis to death by now. Hopefully you're really, really grasping what it is. And I mean, it's obviously all about looking at words, phrases, sentences, all of that, looking at the rhetoric that an author uses in order to, deliver their message. Why are they using those words? Why did they coin that specific phrase? How did they develop a paragraph in order to be more persuasive and more engaging? So you can look at the words like that, but you can also look at the context, which is the rhetorical situation, as I discussed in the last lecture. So the rhetorical situation is huge when you're analyzing something. And you can, again, look at any significant passages that help you to understand the message of the text. So I'm not going to beat analysis any more to death. Other than that, you're looking at the language being used. And then be conversant with the text. That goes back to owning a text. This is the owning the text level of the chapter. Again, means you need to be able to sit down and have a conversation or a discussion, not just summarize it. You take those ideas that the text presents upon yourself and understand it to a whole new level to where you can say, well, Bob says this. Oh, and it's amazing when it happens. It takes a lot of work. It takes a lot of readings of one given text. But once you do that, you start to see the world through the author's eyes, and that's when you can start to use it. So reading is a model for imitating. So think about that. Why on earth would you want to imitate a published article? Maybe because it's a published article. And maybe it's because the author knows what they're doing because they got published. That's not always a given. That's a generalization. I hope you'll forgive me. But very basically, you want to imitate what a good writer does, and good writers tend to get published. I've seen very bad published writers, but once they're published, it's probably a safe bet that they know what they're doing and that you can imitate them. And to imitate them, you're basically just going to use the rhetorical tools that author used to create your own writing. So if you read an article that begins with a personal anecdote, which is a story, at the beginning, and you go, the next topic I'm going to write about would be really good with that. And then you go back to that anecdote, see what is so good about it, how exactly the author made it useful, how detailed they were, how much description they gave, or if they were just really succinct. You look at those little elements to the element that you look at the, different aspects of the element that you liked, and then apply it to your own anecdote. That's how you can imitate a reading in your own writing. And this is a big reason why people who read a lot write really well. It's because they imitate what they read, whether they're doing it consciously or not. I remember in high school, I've always been good at English. I've always been good at writing and things like that. It's just, who I was. Well, actually, it was my mom. But I knew in high school that just because I couldn't tell you the grammar behind my sentences, I could tell you they were correct because I read them in a book, because I read a lot. And even as I went throughout my undergraduate program, I would look at the specific phrasing of words and how the words were arranged and the different ideas and how they were presented. And I was able to incorporate that in my own writing. So I promise, the more you read, the better you'll write. It's also a big reason why most people can't write today, because they don't read. So if that's you, well, there's your problem. The more you read, the better you'll write. It's just a natural association. If you read, more than likely you can write pretty well. And when you look to a reading as a model, you're looking at how that reading is delivering its message, not what the message says. Okay, so it's beyond looking at an article as an object of analysis. Okay, so this is a step up from that. That's how you kind of move past analysis and say, okay, I've analyzed something, but I'm no longer concerned with what's going on. You want to see how it's going on. Okay, even though, again, analysis does do that. It's just a step up. Okay, does that make sense? That one's pretty self-explanatory. You just look at a reading, you find elements that you like, and you apply those elements to your own writing. All right, here's the one that might get you. So using a reading as a lens, and I will warn you right now, this is what paper number 4 will be at the end of the quarter. So if you don't understand it now, work with it, reread this portion of the chapter, and ask me questions, because it's going to be a little difficult, but that's good. Challenging is always good. Very basically, when you use a reading as a lens, you are using the ideas that a reading presents in order to understand another reading. It's a metaphor, a lens as in like glasses, reading glasses. If you read an article A, you put on your Article A sunglasses to look at Article B. And your understanding of Article B is not from yourself, but from the perspective of Article A. Does that make sense? This is also known as methodology. That's a much higher up in education term, but hey, might as well expose you to it now. Okay, so it's a methodology. You're using Article A as a methodology for analyzing Article B. Okay, usually when you are using a reading as a lens, they're theoretical. You're using the theories in a reading, not necessarily the writing itself, if that makes sense. Okay, so you're applying the theory presented in Article A to understand Article B. Going back to my thesis again, that's what I did. I was looking at a medieval poet, Chaucer, and I wasn't analyzing Chaucer based on my own understanding. I was analyzing Chaucer through a medieval philosopher's understanding. So I used the medieval philosopher, who is Occam. I used Occam's writing, very specifically his writing, not just his ideas, but his definitions of certain words, and applied it to Chaucer. So that in the end of my thesis, I said that clearly Occam was a part of Chaucer's writing. Does that make sense? It's a little theoretical, but I know you can do it. I know it's going to be a challenge for paper number 4, but I will pick articles that will, lend themselves well together. So again, when you use a reading as a lens, you are simply taking the ideas and theories from one and applying them to another. When you analyze it, you're not using your own personal thoughts and ideas to analyze it. You're using someone else's. You're just drawing the two together in order to understand one of them. Okay, so there's chapter number 5. Again, I think it's really good because it moves you beyond simply analyzing something, but analyzing for a purpose. Analyze it to imitate it, or analyze it to use it as a lens with another reading. Okay, chapter 6 will move into interpretation, so that is another move. that goes beyond analysis. So if you have any questions on this, let me know, especially when it comes to paper number 4. Do not hesitate to ask questions, and don't let your confusion damage your work. I would much rather you ask than have your work suffer for it. So I am here if you need me.